When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I walked slowly toward the door, my hands trembling, my heart heavy, but I smiled. I thought of all the years I had spent raising my son, of the meals I had cooked, the nights I stayed awake worrying about him, the clothes I washed, the tears I hid. And now, after everything, a single sentence made me feel invisible. "I think it's time you find your own place," she said softly, almost polite. No anger. It cut deeper than any argument could. I looked at my son. He said nothing. He just looked away. In that moment, I realized the person I had raised, the person I had believed would never forget me, now stood silent. I walked to the door. I paused. I wanted to turn around and shout, to cry, to beg, but I couldn't. The tears were already there, threatening to fall, but I swallowed them. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's walking away with your dignity intact, even when your heart is breaking. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the end. It was just a door closing. And perhaps one day they would understand. Perhaps one day they would remember everything I had given. But for now, I stepped outside into the cold, quiet evening, carrying my years of love and sacrifice silently in my chest. I was born in a small town where life moved slowly and family meant everything. My parents had a simple home, a little garden, and a strong sense of togetherness. I learned early that love is shown through actions, not words. I watched my mother cook, clean, and care for us without complaint. I promised myself I would do the same for my own family one day. When I married, my husband was kind and gentle. We had little money, but we had each other. I remember the first few years clearly. Mornings full of washing, cleaning, and preparing meals. Evenings were quiet. We would sit together, sipping tea, talking about our dreams. Life was hard, but it was full of love. Then, my son was born. I remember holding him for the first time. His tiny hands grasped my finger, and I felt a love so deep it scared me. I knew then that everything I did from that day on would be for him. I stayed up nights when he cried. I nursed him when he was sick. I whispered lullabies into the dark, hoping he would feel safe, even when I could not sleep. He grew slowly, as children do. I watched him take his first steps, say his first words, ride a bicycle without falling. I was there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every school project, every heartbreak. I celebrated quietly, never seeking attention, never expecting anything in return. My world revolved around him. At first, the tension was small. Little things that I told myself didn't matter. A meal left untouched. A message unanswered. A glance that seemed colder than it used to be. I would smile and say, "It's okay," Perhaps they are busy, but inside, I felt a slow ache. I noticed that my son's wife was often impatient. She would sigh when I entered the room. She would correct my words as if I were a child. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I had raised him and she would eventually see my love. But as months passed, the small signs became impossible to ignore. One evening, I prepared his favorite dinner: chicken curry, fresh bread, his favorite dessert. I placed it on the table and called them to eat. My son came smiling, but his wife barely looked up. She said, "I already ate." I was taken aback. "But this is for you. I made it fresh," I said softly. She shook her head and walked away. I tried not to take it personally. I reminded myself that they were a young couple, learning their own routines, their own ways. But the coldness continued. I began noticing that my presence seemed to annoy them. Little comments, silent treatments, eyes that avoided mine. I felt a hollow ache in my chest every time I stepped into the room. I tried talking to my son. "Is everything okay?" I asked one evening. He shrugged. "We're fine, Mother. Don't worry about us." But I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I could feel the distance growing. It happened one rainy evening. I had been preparing tea when I heard her voice, soft but firm. "I think it's time you find your own place." I froze. The kettle boiled over. My hands shook. I felt the years of love, care, and sacrifice crashing down on me in a single sentence. I looked at my son. He said nothing. He just avoided my eyes. The silence between us was louder than any argument. I felt tears forming, but I swallowed them. I packed a small bag slowly, methodically. I walked past the living room, where family pictures smiled at me, frozen in happier times. I traced my fingers over the frames, remembering birthdays, holidays, small achievements. They didn't mean anything now, not to them. As I stepped out into the rain, I remembered the nights I stayed awake, worrying about his safety, his happiness, his future. I remembered the meals I cooked, the nights I cried quietly after scolding him for his mistakes, the sacrifices I made silently. And now, it felt as though none of it mattered. For days, I stayed in a small rented room. The walls were bare, and the nights were long and lonely. I thought about every conversation, every meal, every sacrifice. I questioned my worth. I questioned my life. And then, slowly, I began to remember something else. The strength that had carried me through raising a child alone. The first few months were the hardest. I had to adjust to living alone after decades in a family home. Simple tasks became reminders of absence. The kitchen was smaller, the room was quiet, The evenings stretched endlessly. But slowly, I found my rhythm. I started small, a cup of tea in the morning without feeling rushed, a walk in the park where no one questioned me, a book I could read in peace. I discovered that silence could be gentle, that solitude could be comforting. Being alone did not mean being unloved. I wrote letters I never sent. I wrote about my feelings, my regrets, my memories. I wrote about my son, the boy I had raised, and the man who now seemed so distant. Writing became a balm for my heart. It reminded me that my love, though unseen, was real. It reminded me that my life, though changed, still held meaning. Occasionally, I saw him from afar. He walked past my small home once, with her by his side. I did not call out. I did not run. I only watched. I felt sadness, yes, but also a strange calm. I realized that their choices were theirs. I could not control them. I could not force recognition or gratitude. All I could control was my own heart. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected. I joined the small community group. I helped others, quietly, without expecting anything in return. Slowly, I felt my heart open again. Slowly, I felt the weight of years of neglect lift. I learned that giving love freely, even when it is unrecognized, is still valuable. It still matters. One day, I received a simple message from my son. Just a few words. I miss you, Mother. It was not an apology, not recognition, not reconciliation. But it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning, no matter how small, is enough to remind us that love can endure. Now I sit by my window, sipping tea, listening to the rain fall. I think about the years I have lived, the sacrifices I have made, the love I have given. I think about my son, about the family I lost, about the heartache and the lessons. I have learned that love is not always returned in the way we expect. Sometimes the people we give everything to may not see it. Sometimes silence and distance are the only answers we receive. But I have also learned that love is not wasted. Patience, kindness, and sacrifice have their own quiet power. Strength can be found in walking away, in standing tall, and keeping your heart open even when it hurts. So I sit here, quietly, with a calm heart. I remember the past, not with bitterness, but with understanding. I remember the love I gave, the lessons I learned, the life I lived. I smile softly, knowing that though they may have acted as if it meant nothing, it mattered to me. And sometimes that is enough. Life is strange. Life is fragile, but it is also beautiful. Even in heartache, there is growth. Even in loss, there is hope. And even when we feel invisible, our love and our sacrifices leave marks that time can never erase. So I keep living. I keep loving. I keep hoping. I carry my heart with quiet strength, knowing that my story, my life, and my love are real, even if no one else sees them. The world moves on, and so do I.